It's a 2012 Ford F-150. Problem is low oil pressure indicator alarm. And what happens is you'll be driving this thing. It'll start up. You get your oil pressure will be where it's supposed to be, in the middle there. You get driving, you stop at a light, or you're at a stop for a turn, or parked in the driveway or something like that. Oil pressure will drop down, and then we'll get an alarm in the center of the console here. What we're going to need to do to be able to get at that oil pressure sensor is we've got to remove some stuff out of the way here. So we're going to have to remove this stuff here. And it starts off with this ducting. So we've got our gear clamp there. We've got a gear clamp here. We've got a connection on here. Now it's on the bottom. There'll be a little tab. And if you press that tab, push it, and then pull this hose off, it'll come off. And then when you want to put it back on, you just push it past and it clicks. It clicks into place there. Our last connection is here, and I just disconnected this hose off of there. That'll remove this out of the way. Once we've got that out of the way, we just disconnect this. There's going to be a red locking tab on the bottom, right down there. So you will release that locking tab, and then you can pull this out. If you can't get it where it is right now, you're going to take these clamps off of here. There's 3 of them along this side. Just go one back there, 2, 3. Pull those off, hinge this up, take that out of there, twist it upside down so you can get at that red tab. Unlock the tab, disconnect that. This will come off. And then what we're left with is the bottom portion of this air box, I guess we'll say. Release that pinch clamp, pull that hose off. That hose is connected along the side here. You can see it right there. It's connected along the side. So you'll disconnect it there. There'll be some fasteners on the side of the box here. You'll take it off of there. And then you've got a bolt here, and you've got another bolt there. You got to remove those 2. There's going to be 13 mil. But to get at this one, you got to remove this. So that's 10 mil. This will come off of there. Just flip that over to the side. Then you can get at that bolt. You remove those 2 bolts, and you've disconnected that hose. This whole thing should lift up, and you get it out of the way. And now, after all of that, we should be able to get our room in there to see that oil pressure sensor down in there behind the alternator. First thing we remove is this ducting here. Let me just take a quick look. We've got that gear clamp on that side. We've got another gear clamp on that side. We have a connection on here, and we have this rubber hose connection there. You disconnect those, and then you can get that out of the way. And then this connects to that, and that's just the top of the air cleaner. There's just going to be some snap clamps on the end. You undo those. This hinges up, pulls that out of the way. Then you get your air cleaner underneath to the portion of the air box there. Now inside here, this is the bottom portion of that air box that was over here. So it's just got these 2 things. The saddles are little pins that kind of rest in there. You've got 2 bolts on the side here, and it's going to be there and there. So to get at this bolt here, you're going to have to remove this clamp. So that's just a 10 mil up there. You remove this, get that out of the way. Now you can access that bolt. This one and this one are going to be 13 mil. Those 2 are going to be right here. You remove those. This hose here, you disconnect. That hose is routed from here down, around. There it is. So you just disconnect that, and then you're just gonna disconnect the horn out of this rubber shield here. Here's that horn on this side. You just remove that out of the rubber shield. Everything else is connected. These hoses and stuff are still connected to our overflow jug. And then we're just gonna lift that up out of there, set it over here. With all that out of the way, now we have more access to get in behind the alternator, and that's where our sensor is going to be. So this is the best I can do to show you where that sensor is. And what we're looking at is the plug. And it looks to me like there's a piece of tape on the end of that plug where that wire is kind of held in place. I don't know if there is, say, like a short or a kink in the wire, and somebody will tape it like that so that it'll maintain continuity. or if the plug is damaged and it is taped on there like that. I'm going to call this an indication error. I think what's going on here is you start the vehicle, it shows that it's got pressure. And then as you're driving, there'll be moments where it drops down to 0. Why do we have this low oil pressure? Well, the reading says it's low. Is it a true reading? That's what I'm going to ask. I don't think that it is. I think that we have a malfunction here where we get a false reading. And then there's 3 things here. You've got the pressure sensor. Is it good or faulty? And then you've got your wiring to that sensor. So is the wiring good? And then lastly, you've got the connection. So if your sensor is good, your wiring is good, then the connection must be bad, which would then mean that plug down there. Moving forward, we're going to get rid of this alternator out of the way so we can get at our wiring. To do that, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that red wire off the top post there. That's going to be a 13 millimeter. I'm going to need some long extensions to get at that. We've got our top bolt there. That's going to be a 15 millimeter to remove that one. Down below there we have another bolt, but it's hidden behind that tensioner, so you're going to have to remove the tensioner arm. The bolt for the tensioner arm is going to be 13 millimeter, and that bottom bolt for the alternator should be 15 millimeter. You're going to want to push that alternator this way to get those ears out of the bracketry there, and then it's free. Once it's free, you can flip it up like this, and then you can access that electrical plug way easier and unplug that. And now you should be able to remove the alternator entirely. There's going to be an air dam on the front of the truck to remove those just 2 nuts on there. You'll need a deep 15 millimeter to get those because the studs stick down quite far. And that's just to get some access underneath there while we try to find the wiring and how it's routed underneath the vehicle. In order to get this wiring out so we can replace the end on there, we've got to free it up, and there's a connector way deep down in there that we got to disconnect so that we can get this wiring up and out the top so we can change that plug. It connects right into the side of the oil pan here. So that is what we're removing to try and get at. If you can see, it's way up in there. Very hard to get at from either the bottom or the top. I removed the sensor there, just put a plug in, stop that oil from coming out of there, and I'm gonna try and get in there with some snips or something like that, get that wiring free from down in there. We finally got that connection free, and this is the problem right here. This little thing, it clips into a hole down there and holds the wiring up against the side of the engine, and it is strategically placed to ruin your day, and that's what we had to cut away so we could get our wiring up here. What I ended up doing was, after I removed everything I could get out of the way, I was able to get an X-Acto blade in there and cut from the bottom up. And then so this is that plug that goes to the oil pan down at the bottom. That's what we had to disconnect there, and we had to disconnect that connection. And then along the way, this is for our sender, our oil pressure sender. We've got a few more connections like this one here and that one there. And you disconnect those, freeze up the wiring, and now we can do our work here. We stripped back the insulation here to expose this whole wire. Take a look at that, and also in here too. Make sure we don't have any problems for either one, and then we'll just get ready to replace this end. Again, we think that the damage is right in the end of the plug there. We think that that's probably the bad spot. Maybe this, sometimes it gets bent back and forth too many times, and then it compromises that connection. So here we go with the new parts here. This is the connector that we got. So that's the connector we're going to be changing out. And it's just a 1-wire connector. So we'll just strip that. We're going to solder that connection, make sure it's good and it's gonna stay. And then we got to insulate the wires again. You want to kind of put some good insulation on there so it don't get damaged. And then here is our Motorcraft sensor here. So this is the Motorcraft one. They suggest to replace it with the factory replacement sensor, and this is the one that we had removed. And this is new. Apparently it was just changed, so there's no need to throw that away, but we will be replacing it with the factory original. We want to make sure that we get a good connection here, so we're going to solder this connection, and just to do that we just strip back the wire, same amount on both sides. I fan it out, dip it in some paste, intertwine it together, and kind of give it a little bit of a twist. And then all you need then is the pencil torch and some solder. Heat the bottom, introduce the solder from the top. Solder goes to the heat. So we got the shrink wrap on there, and all that is a rubber sleeve that goes around. You have to put this on first before you do your soldered connection. And then after the connection's done, you just slip this over top of there and then just use a heat gun to shrink it on. I just put some extra shrink wrap in there as a little extra protector. Next, we're gonna put this snake skin on here, this wire protector. We'll just put a sleeve of this on each one. So this is one with some on, this is one without. We'll put another one on here. That'll also protect the wire too. Once you put this on, you can wrap this around with black tape, and then you've got it totally sealed. Here's where we've pulled our wire back through the bottom here, and we've plugged it into where it goes into the oil pan. So we've bolted on our bottom air down there in the bottom. There's 2 bolts for that. I used a 5/8 deep to get those back on. Down in underneath here, after we've got everything connected, we had our red positive wire to the alternator. We had that plug in behind there. If yours is equipped, this is also where the block heater plug is on the side. And then originally what we were targeting was that oil pressure sensor. So we plug all that stuff in. If you can see, I just put a zip tie loosely on there to keep it away from the exhaust. There's that heat shield there, but all those wires are pretty close to that exhaust, so we're gonna keep them back from that. And then we rerouted our wires as it was before, so there's some little connects here that hold it all in place. We put our alternator back on. There's a top bolt and bottom bolt, that's both 15 millimeter. That red wire connection was a 13 millimeter. We've installed our tensioner, which again was a 13 millimeter to bolt that on, and then we installed our belt. This one here, you will have to turn it counterclockwise to release the tension to install the belt on there. We got the bottom of the air box back in there, and those are those 2 13 mil bolts that hold that down. You just lined up with some rubber grommets, pins in the bottom there. Remember that hose goes around and connects right there. Then we've got this thing that has to go back on, that's 10 mil on that. Over here, we got to remember to put our plug back in on that. Got our gear clamp there on this. Gear clamp there. Push that fitting in, and we connected that there. And lastly, if I didn't mention it before, you got to disconnect your battery on this. So basically, when you take this off of here, this one here and that one there should be about an 8 millimeter. Remove those, disconnect that battery. And the reason you want to do that is when you're trying to disconnect that red wire off the alternator, that's positive, and you hit anything metal down there, you're going to get some sparks. So that's why you want to disconnect the battery while you're doing this.